Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We'll call it to order, so we'll begin with the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Missoula County acknowledges that this event in the Sophie Moise Room takes place on the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. Public announcements, we're going to adjust the meeting order, so 7C is now going to be 7E for our hearings. Any other public announcements?
I jump in here, Juanita. Sorry, folks, I am not joining you in person today. I am Commissioner Dave Strohmeyer, recovering from COVID. So this way I don't have to be masked in the room with you today.
Glad you're recovering, Dave. Any public comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, our current claims list, and Commissioner Slotnick is in a mediation, so he's not here. Current claims received as of August 18th, 2022 to August 25th by the Commissioner's Office totals $3,990,625.22. We have, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hearings today, and we're going to begin with the Mission View Evero Open Space Bond Project. Kaylee. Yeah.
There we go. Thank you. It's been a while since I've used this. So good afternoon, Commissioner Vero and Commissioner Strohmeyer. So today's item is a proposal to use, Kaylee Becker, Missoula County Open Lands Project Manager. Today, the hearing is for a proposal to use up to $32,449 of open space bond funding towards a donated conservation easement in the Evero area on 90 acres. Five Valleys Land Trust is the project sponsor, and they would be holding the conservation easement. I'm going to turn it over to Eric from Five Valleys Land Trust to give a short presentation on the project, and then I'll follow that up with a brief staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee. My name is Eric Greenwell, and I'm taller than this mic accommodates for. No, I'm a project manager with Five Valleys Land Trust, and I want to thank Commissioner Vero and Commissioner Strohmeyer for your audience today to talk about this project. The project in question is this is going to be a donated conservation easement. The landowners, one of which is in the room today. His name's Gary, and I want to thank him for coming as well. The landowners want to donate the conservation easement to Five Valleys Land Trust. So we're talking about a donated conservation easement on 90 acres that are located just east of Evero, off of Mercer Lane. That's the county road to access the property. If you could hit the next slide for me, just to sort of locate us. This is a vicinity map which sort of shows the context of where the property is located. It's the 90-acre piece there in the center, and it's surrounded by lands that are held by the tribe, the state of Montana, and then there's also a conservation easement that Five Valleys already holds. And the purchase of which was funded by the Open Space Bond Program, and that's the Hayes Evero Conservation Easement, and that's the sort of diagonal line property there on the map. And I think it's also important to note, and I'll talk about this in a second, that those lands extend to Forest Service lands as well. Can we hit the next slide, please? Thank you. I just want to, at a high level, touch base on some of the conservation values that I think advance the goals of the Open Space Bond Program. The wildlife habitat and native plant communities category, I think this project definitely advances those goals. The tribe was involved, the Department of Natural Resources with the tribe was involved in identifying some of the key species. There, a reach of Finley Creek goes through the property, and that contains a pure population of West Slope cutthroat trout. It's also grizzly habitat, and the landowners will tell you at length all the other great animals that they have seen there, including elk and bighorn sheep, and the list goes on. In terms of water quality, the one thing I just wanted to call folks' attention to is in the Flathead Reservation Comprehensive Resource Plan, they identify residential development and strip development in the Evero area as major issues affecting air and water quality, cultural resources, and wildlife habitat. And so this conservation easement would limit development to one residential unit on the whole 90 acres. And so that speaks to the goals of water quality. It is a working landscape. I've been impressed with the landowners' forest management techniques. The property's in the ecological condition it is today because of their great management of the forest. They also raise hay and have raised cattle, so it does speak to the sort of cultural goals of the working landscape as well. In terms of the public values, this property is located in the Missoula County Planning Region. The Montana Fish and Wildlife, the statewide Wildlife Action Plan identifies it as a Tier 1 terrestrial focal area and has been recognized as having significant fish and wildlife communities that are in greatest need of conservation. And the Flathead Reservation Comprehensive Resource Plan also says that land subdivision and development continue to diminish wildlife habitat. So in terms of public values, I just wanted to call those out. Could you hit the next slide for me? Thank you. And I just wanted to highlight this one last map. In working with the OLC, they reminded me that there's an additional category called unique conservation values. And there's two in particular I want to call out. One is that this property is located within the traditional boundaries of the reservation, of the Flathead Indian Reservation, and it was sold out of ownership through the allotment process in the 1920s, out of tribal ownership. And so this would protect and meet some of the goals of the Flathead Reservation Comprehensive Resource Plan. And the tribe submitted a letter of support that I think speaks for itself in terms of the importance of this property being conserved to the tribe. The other important or unique conservation value I want to call your attention to is the fact that this, while it's 90 acres, connects a lot of other larger portions of protected property that are managed for wildlife habitat. And so what you're seeing is not just 90 acres, but a corridor for wildlife and a connective piece in that tissue. And so I just wanted to call attention to that as well. If we could go to the next slide, please. And this last slide is the budget and sort of underscores the request for $32,049. Through the course of this, I know that the OLC and county staff has recommended funding this project at $26,300, and so I just want to take this opportunity to plead my case for the full $32,049 if the commissioners decide to fund it at that level. The two points I just want to make are that, you know, when I originally spoke with the county staff about adding one in particular line item in here, and that is staff time, direct staff time related to completing the transaction. They had told me, you know, the reason for adding staff time was to increase the pace and scale of conservation in Missoula County. I want to speak to that point. I want to say that when the landowners originally came to me and said that they wanted to donate an easement, there's a saying in land conservation work that no low-hanging fruit is low, even if you think it's low. And the reason that is because it costs money. If we're going to acquire a conservation easement that we're going to protect forever into perpetuity, we really need to do our due diligence. And that's why you see a cost of $32,049, because we do extensive work on the front end to make sure that the conservation easement is sound and that we can protect those conservation values for the public benefit into perpetuity. So it is a price tag. And it's easier to say yes to landowners like Gary and the other landowners of this property when we know that we have a funding source like the Missoula County Open Space Bond Program to help us cover those costs to make it happen and to bring their legacy into focus and to make it happen. And so I really want to say that it is increasing the pace and scale of conservation because it allows us to say yes, and it allows us to do it quickly. This is the fastest conservation easement I've ever worked on from beginning talking to the landowners to the end. About 8 months it's been, and we're hoping to close pretty soon. So it is increasing the pace and the scale, the ability to say yes. The only other point I want to speak to is, you know, I struggle with this budget because when you look at this budget, it says it says these things cover 100% of the cost, but this isn't 100% of the project. And what I mean by that is before our board approves a project, we have extensive conversations with landowners to find the right fit. And so there is costs associated with that, right, that aren't covered by grants, or we have general operating that we have to cover. And then really the big portion of it is on the back end. Our stewardship team would tell you that the project doesn't really start until we sign on the dotted line, and now we have a perpetual obligation to monitor, I would say a perpetual responsibility to monitor and enforce the terms of the conservation easement. And so this is 100% of the cost to acquire the easement, but it's not 100% of the work that we do throughout the course of the life of the conservation easement and the relationship with the landowners. And so when Five Valleys is evaluating whether to say yes or not, we have to consider all of those things in the lifespan of the project and where the revenue is going to come from and where it's going to go and the risks that we're going to take on. Being able to say yes and have these costs covered in the front end makes it easier to fulfill our perpetual obligation to protect and our perpetual responsibility to protect these conservation values in perpetuity for the public benefit. So I just kind of wanted to highlight those 2 points. And then I wanted to conclude and allow the commissioners or anyone to ask questions of me, and I know Kaylee's going to come back up.
Thank you. Are you going to come back up, or is there anyone from OLC who'd like to speak to this project?
Ron Slater, SCHLADER. I am a member of the Missoula County Open Land Citizen Advisory Committee. On August the 2nd, a group of us visited the project area. What we saw was a managed parcel of land that meant a great deal to its owners. It's heavily timbered and is ideal as a wildlife cover area and a great wildlife travel corridor. We met as a committee on August the 11th and discussed the proposal in detail. We all agreed the parcel more than meets the intent of the taxpayer-approved open space bond. Therefore, the Missoula County Open Lands Citizen Advisory Committee highly recommends approval of an expenditure of up to $26,300 in 2006 open space bond funds for a donated conservation easement for the Mission View Evero Open Space Project.
Thanks, Ron. Gary, would you like to?
For the record, I'm Gerhard Knudsen. I'm one of the owners of this property.
And Gary, if you can just
I better
be
go.
close to the microphone. You can leave your mask on, just be close to it. There you go.
Okay, again, Gerhard Knudsen, and I'm one of the landowners. There's really very little that I can add to what's been said. I know there's considerable documentation was provided as part of this agenda item. I just really want to thank the Open Lands Committee and the members of the tribal natural resource staff that reviewed the project in a very thoughtful and thorough manner. I guess all I can say is I appreciate your consideration of our request for this money, and also that we're going to be able to have some land that's in perpetuity and is protected. And that's all I have.
Thank you. And Kaylee? Okay.
Thank you. I'll just follow all that up with a brief staff report. So as was covered by the OLC member, they did make their recommendation and were out on the property on August 2nd along with 2 of the commissioners. And then the OLC members completed their evaluations of the project based on criteria adopted by the Board of County Commissioners via Resolution 2007-40. And they ranked the project highest in terms of wildlife habitat and public values. I'll repeat a little bit of what was said just from a staff analysis on the aspects of the project that really stood out and are strong points for the project. So the location of the property is within an important wildlife habitat kind of movement corridor based on proximity to other protected lands, public lands, and wildlife highway crossings. The property also contains farmland of local importance. And then, as was noted, there is a letter of support in the project, the packet that was submitted for this item today, that is from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribe, as the project is within the Flathead Reservation. Lastly, based on staff analysis, the project meets the following purposes of the open space bond: protecting water quality of rivers, lakes, and streams, protecting wildlife habitat, conserving working ranches, farms, and forests, managing for growth, providing open space and scenic landscapes. As you saw in the presentation, the request today is for $32,049, which is 100% of the project costs and works out to $356 in bond funds per acre. Just to put that in context, the average over all the projects has been open space bond funding of $359 per acre, with an average match of $4.7 of bond funding to $1 of, nope, I messed that up, $4.7 of matching funds to $1 of bond funding, sorry. And with that, I wanted to share the staff recommendation, which is that we are recommending the project be funded for up to $26,300, and this would cover 100% of the transaction costs, and then 50% of the requested reimbursable Five Valleys Land Trust project staff time. And at that amount would work out to $292 dollars in open space bond funding per acre. And that is all I have for the staff report, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks. Is there any public comment on this? And I don't see anyone online. Okay, we'll close public comment. Commissioner Strohmeyer?
Thank you, and thanks, Gary, for joining us today. It was a delight to be out on the property here a number of weeks back. I think this is absolutely a worthy project and a good investment of these public bond dollars. I appreciate the concern of increasing the pace and scale of the work that we're doing. I do, though, tend to agree with staff and OLC that we are putting in some dollars towards staff time to assist with that, but we also think that this is kind of what Five Valleys does, and it's important for Five Valleys to remain having skin in the game as part of this work. So I agree with staff's recommendation, OLC's recommendation, and I would move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the expenditure of up to $26,300 of the county's portion of the 2006 Open Space Bond Funds for the Mission View Evero Open Space Bond Project, and approve the resolution.
Thanks, and I second that. And then just like to add that I really appreciate this as an example of a variety of landowners coming together to protect a piece. It's just it's a great example for the rest of the community out there, that a different strategy for conservation that really works. And I know back in 2006 when this was started, there was some concern about how do you get smaller landowners, how can they participate? And so this is just a great example. And so really appreciate, Gary, you and your partners bringing this project forward. And yes, I agree, and Eric, totally hear your position, but it's also important to have Five Valleys, like Dave said, skin in the game. And this, I'm not doing the rough math, $6,000, $5,000, feels like this demonstrates Five Valleys' skin in the game for the project. Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, next up we have Running W Ranch Covenant Amendments. And I've been dying to know, with Running W, is this the piece of equipment, or is this a brand? Because I have an old Running W in the barn, and just was really wondering where the name came from.
Honestly, I'm not positive on that note. Maybe Jamie, the rep, might know more than I. I see her popping on and shaking her head no.
Okay. It's a sketchy piece of equipment that I've never used, and I've just, yeah, stuff that my grandfather used on horses, and I wouldn't want to do it. Sorry, Jamie, go ahead. Or Nick.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
I'm going to start my PowerPoint here, and I'll give a brief presentation. Here it pops up. All right, so this is the Running W Ranch Covenant Amendment. This is a request from Track 2 COS 6492 LLC, and the representative is WGM Group, and Jamie is on the line here for further questions after the staff report. Just giving a quick background on the subdivision. It was approved originally in 2005 as a 318 lot subdivision with multiple phases. Phases 1 and 2 were filed in 2008, and then there were various phase amendments that changed the phasing schedule, but ultimately phase 2A was filed in 2021. Phases 3 through 11 remain unfiled. At the time of approval, it was approved with a plan variation overlay to the base CRR3 zoning district, and this just provided it varied the side yard setbacks and other setbacks within the district with the base of CRR3. And then phases 3 through 11 were recently rezoned as part of the broader Missoula County zoning update project. The phases that were already platted, so phases 1 and 2 and phases 2A, those have remained as legacy districts with the CRR3 planned variation overlay. All right, so the covenant amendment request is to amend Section 7 of the Running W Ranch covenants to allow for varied housing types and increased density. Section 7 was called out as a section in the conditions of approval as a section that could not be amended without governing body approval, so that is why we are here today. Section 7 was pretty much restricted all residential lots to single-family residential with some small variations for attached ADUs. And with the new zoning update to align with this, the applicant is requesting an amendment to allow for these varying housing types that the new zoning would allow for. The project was sent out to agencies around Missoula for comment. There was no comment received. It was also posted in the Missoulian on August 21st and 28th, and we also received no comments from that posting. When we review adjustments to file plats and other filed documents, we are looking at section 6.7.4 of our subregs, and we use these 9 points in our staff report to base all staff recommendations off of. I'm just going to highlight a few of the main ones that came out of the staff report. First, the request is deemed minor in nature. The changes would not affect the would not affect the zoning or what is on the ground for anything that's already filed. This would be only only the phases that are unfiled. The project would comply with the zoning regulations that are in place currently. There's a goal within the Missoula County Growth Policy to allow it for varied housing types, so this would help further align the subdivision with that goal. And last, the changes are not deemed incremental. The applicant is proposing to change this for all phases of the Running W Ranch subdivision that remain unfiled. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the covenant amendment. There are 3 conditions of approval that we are recommending. The first is that staff would recommend the covenant language prior to recording. Second is staff would also like to review the proposed covenants to make sure that to make sure that some landscaping requirements that were stipulated in the original subdivision approval have followed through to the new covenants. And then third, as what comes with our subregs, the applicant would have 60 days to file the changes with the clerk and recorder's office, or the approval would be deemed invalid. That's all I have for the staff report, and I'm here for questions, and I know Jamie's online as well.
Thanks, Nick. Jamie?
Thank you, Juanita and Dave and Nick. The only other thing I think I'd like to add, just for a little bit of clarification, is that the top of our request letter, we do refer to it as Running W Ranch / Meadowlands subdivision. So just for future reference, the unfiled phases of Running W Ranch, we are going to change the name of that and give it a little bit more of a unique identity from phases 1, 2, and 2A. And so I believe the name that we'll be going with is Missoula Meadowlands subdivision. So just a little bit of an FYI and a clarification there. Otherwise, we don't have any concerns with the conditions that staff is proposing.
Thank you. So I don't have a microphone. Try this one. Okay.
I hear you.
Yep, there we
Yeah.
go. So the language that we have here is correct? That, okay.
Yep, we don't have any issues with it.
Is there any public comment on this change? Okay, we'll close public oops, Kathy.
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you for the chance to comment on this. This is connected to the subdivision I live in. So I do have a question as far as if you are going to increase the amount of units, is there going to be an increased access point to these subdivisions, as there is only one real access, the other one, the road is not really a road. So that is a concern I have living out here, so I wanted to know if that had been addressed.
Thanks, Annie. Nick or Jamie? Maybe do you have a map that you could share with folks?
Yeah. I can pull up a map, and I think I'll let Jamie answer the infrastructure question.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Annie. As soon as Nick pulls this up, I'll show you where other point of access is coming from. Nick, do you have the phasing plan, actually? There we go. So on the phasing plan here, Annie, you will see that Running W Ranch Road connects up into Cartage with phase 3 of that subdivision. We are currently working on filing phase 3 right now. We hope to have it filed by the end of this year. And so as part of that, we will be developing that connection to Cartage Road, which would then connect to the signal at 93. And so that'll be the next point of access. And then there is another leg of Running W Ranch Road that circles around RDO, the John Deere distributor. And that is proposed as phase 10 at this point.
I don't see your cursor, Nick, or, sorry.
Got it, Nick?
This is
Yep, there we
Cartage
go.
here, so here's where the future connection phase 3 will connect over to Cartage, right here. And then the other connection is to the south, here to down here.
Okay, thanks. Annie probably knew where those were, but I needed the cursor. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment. Strohmeyer.
All right, if we could queue up the motion again. All right, so just to be clear, the name Running W is what we're going with for right now. Is that correct, Jamie? Okay. That being the case, I would move that we approve the Running W Ranch Covenants Amendment request based on the findings of fact in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. Those conditions being, number 1, the amended covenants language shall be reviewed and approved by CAPS prior to recording. Number 2, the amended covenants shall include boulevard planting and landscaping requirements stipulated in the original Running W Ranch subdivision conditions of approval. This section shall be subject to review and approval by the planning officer prior to recording. And number 3, any recorded documents that are modified by this adjustment shall be revised and then filed with the clerk and clerk and record, is that supposed to be clerk and recorder's office, or,
Yeah,
Or just-
that's a typo on my part.
and then filed within 60 days of the governing body's approval. The approved adjustment shall be void if the applicable documents are not filed within 60 days of approval.
Second with the recorder correction. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Nick and Jamie.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Nick.
Next, we have Patrick Swart with first hearing for road abandonment petition.
Hello, my name is Patrick Swart, and I'm with the Clerk and Recorder's Office. Today, there are two road petitions before you. The first is the abandonment, as you mentioned, and the second is an alteration for which we've had two prior hearings. But both petitions concern the same county right-of-way. Our objective for the first hearing for the abandonment is to open the hearing, hear any public comments, and then to establish dates for the road viewing and second hearing. So with that, the road petition to be abandoned is described as the portion of Bitterroot Road located on the east side of the Bitterroot River from Lower Miller Creek Road in sections 14, 15, 22, all in Township 12 North, Range 20 West. The petition fee has been paid in full, and a notice of hearing has been published twice in the Missoulian. The petition has been signed by at least 10 freeholders in the Missoula County Road District, and all affected landowners have been contacted. So with that, the petition is now presented to the board. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Steve Nide? Did you?
Yes, Commissioner Vero. Steve Nide, Surveyor's Office. I'm actually going to defer to Violet because she's been doing the heavy lifting in terms of scheduling all of our hearings and viewings.
So, we do have just a couple dates that I'll provide to everybody. So this is the first hearing for the new petition to abandon the right-of-way. There will be a road viewing with Steve Nide and Commissioner Vero on September 6th, Tuesday at 3:30, meeting at the intersection of Lower Miller Creek Road and Haugen Drive. Following that, the second hearing for this new petition to abandon is going to be the September 15th public meeting. It will be hybrid like this one, so here in the Sophie Moise and over Microsoft Teams. This meeting, please note, does start at 3 o'clock rather than the normal 2 o'clock start time. So that will be the second hearing for this new petition. Lastly, there is a field trip that we have scheduled for Commissioner Vero and Commissioner Strohmeyer to look at alternate access sites to the river. And that is scheduled for October 25th at 3 o'clock. And that one, they are going to meet at the intersection of, or at the corner of Miller Creek Road and Old Bitterroot Road is where they will be meeting for that. Again, that one is October 25th at 3 o'clock. And those are the dates.
Okay, thank you. So, sorry, Steve, did you have something to add?
Just meet me in my office at 3:30 on September 6th, and we'll drive out together. Others are welcome to join us, and if you'd like to join us, I guess it would be nice if we knew who all was going to show up, and so we don't leave prematurely.
And how best would you like folks to make that contact?
Through the BCC communications site.
Okay.
Sure, we could have people email bcc@missoulacounty.us if you're interested in attending. Steve, did you want to meet everybody to meet at the county, or did you want to meet at 3:30 at Lower Miller Creek.
I
and
think we
Haugen.
should meet out there on site where we've met before.
Okay.
We can leave here at 3:30 and be out there by 3:45 or so.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Was there any public comment on this item? We just want to give people a heads up, we're limiting public comment to 3 minutes. One day, we're going to have a timer in here, but for now, you're stuck with my iPhone. Go ahead.
Hello, Commissioner Barrow and Commissioner Stormeyer. That button, does that work? I'm here in support of the new petition brought in front of you to abandon the unused county road known as 1867 GLL Road that crosses our Oxbow Cattle Company property in section 14 and 15 of Township 12 North and Range 20 West. I just want to make a few points about this road. We know for a fact for the past 26 years, this unused road that cannot be located has had 0 members of the public using it. The only access across the land to the river and FWP parcels has been by permission from Artie Doris or us. Therefore, this is not about moving public access to the road that goes through the heart of our ranch, but creating a new one. One could even argue that the public has not used this road for 150 years. Number 2, the FWP parcels that this road accesses already have substantial access from Ranchette Park, Riverside Park in Lolo, and the other FWP parcels that are on the west side of the river. These parcels, as you have heard and seen, provide easy and unique access for the members of the public. Third thing is, as we have attended hearings on this road and had site visits, I believe it has become very clear that this is not about access, just some neighbors that are upset with me. I could argue that I have more neighbors than anyone in Missoula County when you consider our deeded land and grazing leases. I have had very limited interaction with these neighbors that have brought the issue in front of all of us. It is limited to 2 interactions. One ironically has to do with access, as they are upset that I allow hunters to access our land through the FWP block management program. And 2, we moved our fence line to the actual property line. By moving the fence to our actual property line, we gained about 10 acres of land for our business and also made sure that the 5 Valleys land conservation easement boundary is clear and not at risk. We gave neighbors a year's notice, which resulted in some folks pitching in and paying for their half of the fence, while others chose to be mad at me for fencing the land I own and pay Missoula County taxes on. I believe it is clear that a new road through our place to access the FWP parcels has way more negative impacts to the community than does positive. The last thing the Bitterroot River needs is another access point. This was very apparent to me at the last site visit when we visited the FWP parcels and then Ranchette Park off of Oral-Zumwalt Way. The FWP parcels had wildlife on them, and the riparian vegetation was healthy and grew all the way to the water's edge. When we got to the Ranchette Park, it was dirt paths, fenced trees to protect them, and people to the water's edge. I even picked up some trash on the ground. That view pretty much summed it up for me. Abandoning this unused and unidentifiable road once and for all would be a win for our community by preserving and conserving this part of the Bitterroot for the wildlife, livestock, and public that use it. Let's hold on to a piece of Montana and not ruin it. Sometimes the best we can do for a place is leave it alone. I thank you for your time once again.
Thanks, Bart. Any other public comment on this petition? We see your hand, Ryan, but we have a couple folks in the room first.
I think I'm in the speaker, am I? I'm Elizabeth McClay, and I rise in support of closing the Lower Miller Creek Road.
Can you speak a little closer to the microphone?
You bet.
There we go.
As you know, this road runs directly through Oxbow's headquarters, and it would be devastating to their business. The Oxbow Ranch has been successful in blending ranching and conservation, ecology and economy, and I would hate to see them fail in this community. They have been forward-thinking in providing the neighbors with a conservation easement so that the people in the area have a view shed where they can see the wildlife, the big or little wildlife, the birds and the bees. It's a viewshed I'm sure they enjoy every day. Are they aware that if the road does open to the public, this viewshed will be impacted with traffic, noise, dust, and garbage? Is this what the people really want? Or is, as Bart mentioned, it's just greed, envy, and lack of understanding of what the ranching is about? As I say, I oppose opening the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, anyone else in the room would like to speak to this?
My comments,
Oops.
is that better? My comments
Oh,
are...
and Larry, can you state your name, please?
Yes. My name's Larry Evans. I am a proponent of the petition to alter and an opponent of the petition to abandon. The petition to alter may be proven moot, and the petition to abandon may be proven unnecessary, given some facts that I have found in looking into this. So, without further ado, and I apologize if some of my comments appear to be offensive, that they're not intended to be. There is a public roadway easement. You'll be able to see it on an exhibit that's enclosed in this folder I'll be leaving. It was granted on December 18th, 2003 for valuable consideration received from Missoula County. This grant of public roadway easement recorded at the Missoula County Clerk and Recorder's Office is a contract, and it's binding on the grantor and Missoula County and shall run with the land, wording from the deed. This easement was purchased at taxpayer expense and belongs to the city, or rather to the citizens of Missoula County. On December 9th, 1996, Roy Prock, in exchange for valuable consideration, deeded to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks parcels of land noted in Book 493, page 2293. The deed asserts that access is provided by an existing 60-foot wide public road easement over the existing per GLO Township Plat 1890 and known as the Bitterroot Trail. I think that's a very significant point. As on other documentation, which is not included, but I would be happy to locate and submit, shows that Roy Prock and the Q-Tip Trust had the authority and the right to determine where rights-of-way and easements were located. The property deeds for adjacent landowners, meaning David Mead and Oxbow Cattle Company, are subject to and made reference to GLO roads and trails and Book 1 of roads as disclosed by maps provided by the county commission or county surveyor. Montana Code annotated states the board may not abandon a county road or right-of-way used to provide existing legal access to public lands or waters unless another public road or right-of-way provides substantially the same access. Does substantially the same imply a 60-foot wide public right-of-way? None of the proposed alternatives even remotely provide the same access. The county's Ranchette Park, referenced in the petition to abandon, and which we went and looked at, is behind a locked gate, and Bart Morris has the key and has boasted that sometimes he will allow his neighbors to access the park to make use of his corral. Once on the county-owned park, one would have to cross private property to access the river. This isn't substantially the same access. In fact, it's no access. And by the way, why does a private citizen have a key to public property? Who decides what constitutes substantially the same access? If the county commission assumes the right to abandon, they may be subject to lawsuits wherein they would have to define and justify the criteria by which substantially the same access was determined.
And 30 seconds, Larry.
Okay. Will their justification stand scrutiny, or might it imply a pre-existing bias in favor of one party and based on some other consideration? My last question, by what right can the Board of Commissioners abandon property purchased at taxpayer expense and gift it to a private citizen. And that wasn't an accusation, that was a rhetorical question.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
And can you, yes, thank you, leave that with Violet.
My name is Dave Mead. We own the property near the river. My wife Marilyn.
Dave, I'm sorry, you have to get really close to that
Okay.
microphone or
Is that
stretch
better?
it up because you're tall. There you go.
I won't address the issues in the petition since they're clearly stated. Larry did not mention the access point out of Lolo, which is a pretty wide and public access there as well, which isn't very close upriver from where we're talking about now. But really, the point I wanted to make is something on a little different note. And I would like to ask the simple question of where is the justice in a scenario where families can save their entire life to purchase a piece of property, and in some cases, acquire building permits from the county and then build a house where the title companies did a total search in all these cases and came up clear, although, as we all found out later, they're not required to acknowledge GLO roads. In fact, unless you're a surveyor, it's almost impossible to find any evidence of them. So where is justice served in a situation where all of a sudden a 150-year-old potential public easement to a road that may or may not have existed, and there's no evidence been able to found on multiple days and hard effort in the field by the county surveyors, and this road all of a sudden pops up and threatens the entire piece of property that they own and would completely ruin it for them if it was actually put on the ground again. Even though there's no guarantee it ever was there and there's no evidence of it, if it was put in place, those properties, as far as those owners of the ones I know, ourselves included, would be completely ruined. The question of where the justice in this is simple. There isn't any. That is a very old, 150-year-old antiquated deal. There's lots of laws on the books that shouldn't be there. We all know that. And some of them shouldn't apply in certain situations. And in this case, there is no greater community good for leaving that easement in place. It would not benefit that particular part of Missoula at all to have that in place, as Libby McClay so well pointed out. And so I asked you commissioners, when you're looking through this, to consider these aspects. And I appreciate your time and effort in this case. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Bergenon. I'm here on behalf of Big Hill Property LLC, which is neighbor to David Mead and Oxbow Cattle and one of the affected landowners, and also one of the petitioners for the petition to abandon the county road right-of-way. I just wanted to make a couple of quick points here. The first of which is that the properties in question are all encumbered by conservation easements that protect certain things that are identified within the conservation easement and usually defined as conservation values. And those things are typically like vegetation, wildlife habitat, and scenic view shed. I want to note that the conservation easements in question here on all of those properties where the road crosses do not include public access among their conservation values. And so when the various stakeholders, including the landowners and Five Valleys Land Trust, looked at this and decided to set these lands aside from development, they were not looking at public access as one of the values they were protecting on the property. I've got a short statement I'm going to turn in. I'm not going to read it here. I just wanted to point out, as Larry Evans mentioned, the statutory requirement that in order to abandon the road, the commissioners need to, they can only do so if there's another right-of-way that provides substantially the same access. I looked at a map today of the Bitterroot River. It's about 80 miles long, and I concluded that I was able to count at least 24 different river access sites along the length of the Bitterroot River. And a number of them are pretty close to this site. Bart mentioned Ranchette Park, which the commissioners visited last month. And then there's Riverside Park on the other side of the river that's only about a quarter of a mile away. And there are other tracts owned by FWP that can be used by people, either by access from the river or access by roads. So I would argue that we shouldn't look at the term substantially the same access as meaning precisely the same access, which seemed to be what Larry was implying. We should look at it as meaning substantially, more or less the same. And there are a number of more or less the same perfectly usable public access sites close by on the Bitterroot River. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
I would just like to jump in and mention that it is the county's intention to explore anything that is remotely could be considered substantially the same. So it's not our intention to exclude anything that could possibly work in lieu of this existing right-of-way.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Albrandt. I'm a landowner on Oral Zumwalt Way. I'm also a specialist. My training is in geomorphology, surface land processes. I have physically visited the proposed area and I support the petition to abandon this easement. This is a floodplain, a 100-year floodplain that most of this proposed road would go through, and I had submitted previously a number of examples of the damage that would occur by trying to build this imaginary road that cannot be found. And there's a reason it cannot be found. It's 150 years old. If the right-of-way ever was formally recognized, that's a good question. But you've had 150 years of sedimentation, which is depositing sands, gravel, silts, clays, on top of this floodplain, which is undisturbed. So how you would ever find a road 150 years later, I've looked at satellite imagery, I've looked at on-site investigations, I don't see evidence of a road. And so I think this is very disruptive to the landowners in the area, and I am certainly opposed to development of that road. It disrupts ongoing agricultural activities and environmentally very, very unfortunate to develop. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else in Sophie Moise? Okay, doesn't look like we have anyone in the room, so Ryan Salisbury?
Hi there, good afternoon, commissioners. Sorry, I'm calling in remote. I had to be in Bozeman today, so I appreciate the hybrid option for this meeting. I'm here as one of the petitioners in favor of vacating the Bitterroot Road, and I object to the proposed relocation of the Bitterroot Road. In my mind, the Bitterroot Road is essentially a lost road that was used very rarely back in the day, maybe not at all back in the day. I say this because there was never a bridge built across the river, so that means that this GLO road could have only been used when river flows were low enough to cross with a wagon or when the river wasn't frozen. Taking this lost road and just moving it to the nearest most convenient location is wrong, in my opinion. Moving this road to the proposed location is also, in my opinion, expanding the original use and intent of the Bitterroot Road in this particular location, and relocating the GLO road would expand the use to year-round and would be a significant hardship to property owners and would devalue lands. The right thing to do is to formally vacate this historic lost road. And I also find it interesting that in the last public hearing, we heard a lot of the petitioners that want to see the GLO road relocated complain about hunting in the area and disruption from hunters and whatnot. Yet they're petitioning to relocate a road right through the middle of private property with an existing cattle ranch, and it's going to be very disruptive. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Do we have anyone else online or on the phone? *6 if you're on the phone. Okay, we will close public comment. This hearing remains open. Dave, did you have anything to add?
Nope, it's going to be a continuing conversation for a few more months, so.
Okay, we'll begin with E, the third hearing, road alteration petition. Patrick, you again. Well, E, which is now D, yeah.
We don't have any formal presentation for this hearing, but it's just, I think, more public comment was my understanding.
Okay. Steve, did you want to add anything? You had just this expression on your face, okay. Is there any comment in the room on the third hearing for the road alteration petition? Come on up, Larry.
Okay, it's me again. I'll keep it short. This is not about the way we'd like things to be. I understand the arguments made by the landowners in the area and other conservation cognizant groups. This is about the law. The law was established sometime in the past. The grants were made sometime in the past. If we don't like the way it is, I think that the remedy is to change it via the law. Arguing about what is and what isn't and what's right and what's wrong and how it's going to impact the people in the neighborhood or affect the land is important but irrelevant. This is about the law, and I think that's where it's going to have to be addressed. And beyond that, I have little more to say, so I'll sit down.
Thanks, Larry. Anyone else in Sophie Moise? Okay, anybody online? Okay, we'll close public comment, but the hearing remains open. Oh, yes, thanks, Violet.
Okay. Let me just one more time run through those 3 dates. So the road viewing for the petition that was introduced today to abandon the right-of-way is Tuesday, September 6th at 3:30. Juanita and Steve will be heading out there, maybe arriving at 3:45 at the intersection of Lower Miller Creek Road and Haugen Drive. The second hearing for the same petition is at the public meeting on September 15th. Same place. Again, this public meeting will start at 3 p.m. And then the Commissioner Strohmeyer and Commissioner Vero have a field trip scheduled October 25th at 3 o'clock to look at alternate access sites. So those are the 3 dates one more time.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, Dave, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay, Jenny Dixon with the Thomas Miller Family Transfer.
Good afternoon. Thomas Miller here. Thanks for letting me come a little later.
Great, great. Well, actually, Tom, I think what we're going to do is we'll do a staff presentation first, and then the applicant will speak, and then public comment, and then we'll go with you. You could have spent more time getting blood drawn, right?
It'll be quick. Thanks, Tom. I'm glad you made it here today. So for the record, my name is Jenny Dixon with the Planning Department. And this is a family transfer request from Thomas Miller, represented by Montana Northwest, to divide a tract, a 280-acre tract out in the East County area. I'm going to give you a vicinity, general vicinity. So kind of out in the middle of nowhere, huh?
Yes.
So it's up Kramer Creek Road to, and then there's the Ashby Creek Road, Camas Springs.
I would say it's not Kramer, it's Camas Creek Road to Camas Spring Road. Kramer's pretty much on the other side. And oh, you're coming in from I-90?
As you get in from I-90.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you bet. Just kind of giving locational references for the commissioners and anyone in the public to how you might get there, generally speaking, from familiar locations like I-90. So it is north of I-90 and, as seen on this map, south of 200. But I think the most common way to get there would be I-90, Kramer Creek, and Camas Springs. So 280 acres. Mr. Miller would like to divide this using the family transfer exemption to gift 80 acres, as shown here, to his adult daughter, Carly Rose. And that's shown with the C on the western tract there, 100 acres. And then gift 80 acres to adult son Joshua, shown with the J. And then propose to retain tract 3, remaining tract for Thomas. This family transfer request did not elicit or flag any of the rebuttable presumptions or general evasion criteria. However, we did note a little bit of confusion in the application states that Thomas resides on this property. And in my reading, I assumed that meant he resided in the yurt that is shown on Carly's property, Carly's tract. But in doing a little more research, and Mr. Miller, you may be able to speak to this in a moment, it appears that Mr. Miller resides in Patty Canyon and, I presume uses this property for recreational purposes, and the yurt is there for his use. With the division, that yurt will be on Carly's property. It remains to be seen whether her intent is to live in the yurt or construct another home. But the property, if divided as proposed, would create 3 tracts, 1 for each child, 1 for Thomas. Commenting agencies did not have any concerns about it. Staff is recommending approval. We did discuss this with the commissioners for just a few minutes on Tuesday, and I think we do have some questions for Thomas that I would like to ask before we turn it over to you and your agent for discussion. So if you wouldn't mind, would you come up to the podium? And if you could please state your name for the record. And
Thomas Miller.
Thomas Miller, thank you. We just have a few questions to ask. Did you buy this property with the intent of dividing it?
No.
And I would note for the commissioners that this property was purchased initially by Mr. Miller in, let's see,
October 17, I believe.
October 2017. There was a quit claim to T.E. Miller 3 LLC.
That was my property LLC, yes.
Yeah, and then back to Mr. Miller individual in the last couple of months.
Correct.
So for all intents and purposes, in Mr. Miller's ownership since October 2017. Do you or your transferees intend to transfer your property within the next year?
No.
Do you intend to reside on the property?
No.
How is the property used?
It's recreation. I go there and sit by Camas Creek. It's my therapy, just to hear a little babbling brook.
Gotcha. Have you talked to anyone in the county about going through subdivision review?
No.
Do you expect that the transferred tracts will be developed?
No.
Will the recipients of the property plan on residing on the property at any point?
Well, those are my young kids. One's in college and one just graduated from college. They visited and liked it. I'm more or less looking at, I unfortunately got cancer and my life expectancy's been shortened. And so I'm just trying to put ducks in a row. What my kids want to do with it, they don't even know they're getting it. So I can't answer for them in the future.
Okay.
You know, I don't suspect so that we like it.
Okay.
It should be, hopefully remains the same.
Okay. All right. I would just point out for the commission that the application states, in response to the question, what is the purpose of the boundary line relocation? It is intended to gift land to Thomas's daughter and son in an effort for estate planning and provide Thomas's children with the potential to have a home next to Thomas. The existing home will remain as the residence of Thomas Miller. So if I could ask, Mr. Miller, is the yurt a residence that you use at?
I use it. It's the only building on the premise, and
So
it's
it's a-
next to the creek.
It's a building and not like a tent or?
Well, it's a yurt, which is a tent, a
tent.
glorified tent.
Glorified tent.
With hard floor and a
Yeah.
porch, right? So it just happens to be next to the creek.
Right.
So, and it's got a bear fence around it.
And it has a septic system and water, no?
No, I brought electricity to it.
Electrical, oh, maybe that was the electrical permit that I saw.
Yeah, so it's just meant to have some luxury, so my kids could charge a cell phone.
Okay, so some electrical, but no water or sanitation disposal? Okay. All right, I think with that, I'll end my presentation portion and leave it to the commissioners to ask questions that may help guide. And hopefully I've provided you with adequate information to ask some good questions.
Okay, thanks, Jenny.
You bet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up.
While he's doing that, if I could just make a note that, and Ken, maybe you could address this. In the application, there is a wastewater treatment system inspection report for a pit privy, perhaps? And so that's why I guess I thought there was, and there's a septic.
Previous owners have an outhouse outside the bear fence, like 150 feet from the creek.
Okay.
That's as much as I know about it.
Okay, so there's a septic.
That's not septic, it's an outhouse.
It's a pit toilet, right?
I call it outhouse, what's
Okay.
underneath
Yes.
it
Yep.
is what it is.
Okay. That is in use, or when you're there, that's what you use, or are you?
It's an outhouse, yes. I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
use that, yes.
Okay. Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Thank you. For the record, Ken Jenkins with Montana Northwest Company. First, I would apologize for the confusion created by the application, which is sort of geared toward residential use, residential questions, that sort of thing. This is truly recreational property. The likelihood of anyone living on any of these tracks year-round, it's right at the top of the range pretty much between the Blackfoot and Clark Fork valleys. And I just want to point out too that when we started looking at this, I spent quite a good deal of time with Thomas. I don't want to say agonizing, but the configuration and trying to equalize, be fair to both children and what they were getting, it did play a part in how this is configured. And the other thing, like each of these tracks, what I was impressed with is each of them has a special place that the family likes to go to, where maybe there might be other recreational living quarters like a yurt, or maybe it's just a tent, I don't know. But anyway, no, this isn't really an intention to create year-round residential. It's, Thomas would like each of his children to have part of this place that they like, and the piece he's keeping has a special place on it that he likes. And so, and I did see county permit for a pit privy, that's something you very seldom see. An outhouse with a permit.
Okay, thanks, Ken. And Thomas, yeah, if you want to tell us your story or anything that you want us to know.
My story is simple. I'll say in 2017, I was looking for just a place, right? I did not live in Montana at the time. I had every intent to. When I bought that property where you see the T is where the previous owners, two older gentlemen, had pretty much set up a perfect place with probably the best view from the property. And I said, boy, if I could live 24/7 somewhere, that would be where I would build the house. I actually brought electricity partially up there. There was a permit for that. But then cancer kind of comes when you don't expect it. I don't think I could live up there as much as I want, just for the fact that I'm slated for radiation every day starting next week for 3 months. So my health, I don't think would allow me. That's too far a drive to get to the hospital. So would I like to die up there? Sure. Well, my struggle is just I've never had to face mortality. So I just said, God, something for my kids. So that's as far as I thought it through, So I bought the house. I didn't expect to buy a house at the worst time of a market to buy a house, but I needed to be in town. So that's my story. It's pretty simple. Just trying to get through today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I did want to follow up once you finished asking questions, I do have some follow-up for you.
Okay, I don't have, Dave, do you want, maybe
Yeah,
your
yeah.
follow-up might be useful, but, sorry. Okay, go ahead. Dave has questions.
Yeah, Thomas, Mr. Miller, if you don't mind,
Sure.
thanks for joining us today. So this is a little bit out of the ordinary in that typically for family transfers, our approach has been to look for evidence that someone would actually be in it for the long haul, and by that I mean that the transferee, the party to whom the property is being transferred, in this case your kids or another family member, will likely reside on the property, so it's not just immediately flipped. Part of our hesitation in agreeing to family transfers where there's not that evidence, as we've seen instances, particularly with younger children, oftentimes minor children, who end up with the property and it absolutely did not turn out the way it was presented to us, and shortly, not that long after the transfer occurred, it's under another use that makes it clear that the children will never live on that property. So that's what we typically tried to avoid in the past. So anyway, my question, Thomas, is did you ever contemplate just doing a split such that you gift each of your kids 50% of the parcel, or just, in other words, just split it in half as opposed to retaining a parcel for yourself here?
Well, the parcel for myself, assuming I get through the next 2 years, I still kind of want to live up there, right? So I would prefer my kids not live there. It was meant for me to recreate. I don't want to see houses on the property. I don't even think I'd want to see another yurt. I was looking for an equitable way to divide the property so I had something to give to my kids for recreation. If my kids live there or not, I don't, that's not for me to say. I'm just hoping to see this through, and then I think I've done my job as a dad, right? So all I can say is I'm sorry that's not what you or your experiences were in the past. I don't know what your experiences are in the past, and to me, that's my dream right there, the picture, so it's in your hands, so ask other questions, because that one, to me, is not really, I don't know, it's not ringing high in my life, right? What has happened in the past. So can you rephrase? I don't know what your
Well,
concern would
no.
be with such a thing.
Well, my concern is that these parcels get gifted to your children and that they quickly, and you've even indicated yourself, you don't have a clear, they don't even know that they might potentially be the recipient of these parcels, and you don't have a clear vision of whether or not they would actually want to hang on to this property. And that's precisely what we don't want to do in a family transfer, is set it up so that it's just going to be flipped over and yeah, your kids might garner the proceeds, but that's not what this family transfer exemption is intended for. And I agree entirely. If I were you, this sounds like a fantastic place to reside, but the concern is that we're simply going through the subdivision process at a significantly lower cost than what most folks would have to go through, and it's not going to end up in the intended situation where the children are going to be residing on the property.
Well, they live in another state, and I'm not going to be presumptuous enough to say the kids do what you want them to do. Right now, I'm just happy to get them through college, right? So.
No, I'm with you there.
Yeah, so I that's about as far as I thought this through.
No, I understand. Thank you. And then maybe we have some additional information from staff we'd like to share with us.
Yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you. So, in the last couple of days, I feel like the information in the application did not accurately reflect the situation, and that we drew conclusions and made findings and drew conclusions and made a recommendation based on information that was
Prior to,
close, but, and we may have found differently and perhaps even recommended differently had we known that there was, that there was, when I saw the yurt and saw that in the packet that he will remain in the home, my assumption was that's his home, he's gonna live in it still. And so I think.
That's my place to recreate. This whole thing about residing, what is it in Montana? I'm a Wisconsin boy. You know, my parents had a house, and then they had a house on the lake that we got to go to in the summer, a few weeks out of the year. My intent for this property is for recreation. I would like to live out there. I don't know if I can, right? So I guess I'm in a different mindset. What you all have to deal with in the past is not, to me, I never even given some thought to. You know, but to say that, boy, I have to know if my kids are going to live there.
right, we're just kind of talking about this tool of a family transfer and how this tool is designed to be used. But sorry, keep going, Jenny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, with the parameters set by state law and, you know, well, not recent, to me in my mind, recent revisions to the subdivision exemption regulations, Commissioner Strohmeyer and Vero, you are interpreting the family transfer as I believe it was intended in the revision, and as you've been interpreting it and applying it for the last 6 years, I guess it is, which is that the applicant generally lives there, and the intent is to bring family close to live. And recently, I've heard, you know, in this discussion in the last few days, it's more of recreation, and in fact, with no plans for Joshua or Carly Rose to reside on the property, gives me pause that this family transfer is not as presented in the application, and our findings and conclusions may have been different. And so I put that out there for you to, you know, maybe we go back and we rework this as a, you know, to do an estate planning where you gift recreational land to children can happen through a court order.
Or what would it, like a conservation easement do to, if you don't want this land to be developed, and that's your dream, I mean, is that just too big of a process, or like what?
It's just outside of the purview
It's not
of
okay.
of my department and also of any kind of exemption. Anyone can ask for, seek a conservation easement for protection, you know, after and a conservation easement is placed on the property, there may be less interest, or let me, after there's a division of land, there would be less interest probably on the behalf of any conservation organization to put a conservation easement on it.
Because it's too small.
Because yeah, and it's but I can't say that for sure. The time to pursue that would be before dividing the land, I would think. But again, that doesn't achieve the conservation mission that Mr. Miller's talking about, but it doesn't achieve this division of land. But what I'm hearing the mission really is to create a recreational space, which they already have, and don't necessarily need to divide land to do that.
Yeah, so that's what I'm wondering, do we want to pause this and then you and Ken talk this through a bit more and present us with the exact dream or vision or?
I think there's a difference of interpretation, and, you know, in talking with Ken and hearing Mr. Miller's ideas that they want to have separate tracks for recreation. I don't think that that's going to change.
Well, mine is, I would love to live up there. Can I? I don't know. Do I need to sell that property to pay for medical bills? Maybe. Do I want to split it up so maybe we can still retain some if I had to sell my tract? That, to me, makes sense, right? Otherwise, you know, it's all or nothing, and so you can't buy property anymore. Now, I did that more or less, you know, for inheritance sake, and if I have to go down, right, and, you know, you sell your primary home, which is now Patty Canyon, okay, what if that's not enough? That would be my next place to go, right? Would I prefer to live on T? Oh, you bet. I don't think I'm going to be, in a year's time, if I started, I don't know if I'll see it through. So to me, I'm a little displeased to hear that I have to worry about all the other things that you guys deal with when my world is supposed to be a little simpler than that. At least I would like it to be simpler than that.
Sure.
And I will say from Ken and my standpoint, we've had a few times on the phone, but more or less it's when I'm at the hospital and I'm giving them little bits and pieces. So if it's not, the puzzle's not perfect for you, well, that's my fault, because I don't have a lot of time to give them. You know, so I'll put it out there for you all to think. But a pause to me is crazy. I'm trying to get this done before I go south, right? And you say it's so easy, just, I'm sorry, what's your name on the screen?
It's Dave Strohmeyer.
Dave, you know what? It's not as all that easy, right? So I have been previously married, right? My kids reside with my ex-wife in Illinois. No, to say in my will certain things can happen, sure. When I die, well, that doesn't give my kids a lot of, let's just say, peace of mind. Oh, we can join you and have a piece of the pie when you die. I don't like the sounds of that at all. So if that's the only suggestion you have, I don't like it at all, because that means death has already come upon me. You know, so yeah, I was hoping you would find something, which this is, a little more expedient than me dying, because that's what you guys make it sound like, which to me is untenable. But it is what it is. So if you call it a pause, may it not be a long pause, because I'm headed for 2 months of hell, and I just would like this part taken care of. All right?
Okay, and Ken, oh, sorry, Dave. Ken is
Yeah,
approaching, but.
And I don't, I did not intend to imply that the only options before us are
I'm sorry I said that.
a quick response here, or your your untimely passing, which we absolutely wish the very best in your treatments. What I am trying to say, though, is that there is a way to achieve what is on the screen here by way of dividing the parcels and a way to do so that is more appropriate to the sort of situation that you've outlined, keeping your options open to, yeah, maybe you will find yourself in a position where you may need to, for financial reasons, sever off a portion of this and take your parcel and sell it. But that is not the intent of the state law that pertains to family transfers, and that would fly in the face of how we've applied this tool in the past. So that's all I'm saying, is that what you can see on the screen can be achieved. The family transfer tool, I believe, is not the right fit for that.
Yeah, but I gotta tell you, so I tell them, my kids, hey, listen, we're gonna
Actually,
take,
can you get a little closer to the microphone? Yeah.
I'm gonna tell my kids, hey, we're gonna put plats of survey together and you gotta plant houses here and then you can have a family transfer. That seems a little illogical also.
No, and again, that too is not what I'm saying. You can divide this up through a subdivision process and never build a home on it. But it's the process that we're talking about here, is that if you go through the process of a family transfer, we want to see a commitment that someone will be dwelling on it. If you go through the subdivision process for a minor subdivision, it makes no difference to me whether you ultimately end up building on it or using it recreationally, but that is the appropriate process to go through.
Ken?
Thank you once again, Ken Jenkins. This residing on it question. So my family has had a 160-acre homestead in the Swan Valley my entire life. And at some point, the old homestead cabin got to be too crowded when all of us grew up and started having our own children. And I have a 20-acre family transfer that came from my parents. And I have a beautiful cabin there, and my family and I enjoy it a lot. But I don't live there. I think that the idea of creating a place for his children where they might be able to take their families and have their own cabin or yurt or whatever it might be, I don't think there's anything in the model law from the state or in the presumptions of evasion in Missoula County's regulations. I don't think there's anything there that would prohibit a person in Montana or Missoula County from gifting a piece of recreational property to their children. I don't, if you look at the facts, probably half of the people in this county have a cabin somewhere, and they may well want to create a gift for their children so that they can bring their families there. I don't really understand the basis for a denial. Look, a formal subdivision of this property would never fly. It's at the top of the divide between the Blackfoot and Clark Fork valleys. It is not, even though there are a few tough old birds that live up on top of there, but it's not really conducive to residential type property. And I don't know that there's anything in state law that pins this much emphasis on year-round residents. So nothing is going to change about what we're asking for. So if I think in the interest of time, and you guys are busy, I understand it is a difficult task that commissioners are charged with to look at these family transfers and decide whether or not it is evasion. I can only speak for my experience with Thomas, that this seems very legit to me. It's a piece of ground that he loves, and he wants to give each of his children part of it. And if things work out well, he would like to try to live there. But living there might be recreational use in the summer. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Go ahead, Dave.
The family transfers we've reviewed have come with some level of commitment on the part of either the applicant or their grantees of the transfer that they would reside there, and that tells us that that's kind of a bit of a litmus test in terms of their commitment to keep the land and not just flip it. I think that's what is our underlying concern, is that what we've heard today, and I do not question whatsoever Mr. Miller's intent here, and it's all very legitimate and well-reasoned, but I've seen no evidence that, particularly given that the kids don't even know that this is transpiring, that they have any desire to keep this for any length of time after they get it, and that's what's problematic. If the transfer comes with a desire to occupy the property, that's a pretty strong indication that it's going to stay in the spirit of the family transfer for some time. Maybe not in perpetuity, but for some time. Without that, it's extremely speculative.
And Dave, when you say occupy, you're meaning not necessarily just residential year-round, but as in Ken's situation, it's a commitment to be on the property.
Well, partially yes, but I think that's one way to interpret occupation of the property. But more often than not, we hear from folks that yes, the property will be developed because my adult children have every intent of building a home right here on the property. That's what we hear more often than not. It could be some evidence or commitment that they're not necessarily going to build a permanent home there and reside there year-round, but some other strong evidence of occupancy of the property. And I frankly am not seeing that here today, and that the parcel as a whole could continue to be used as recreational land and shared by all parties.
Hey, Dave, you wonder why people mislead you if that's the options you leave them? Boy, oh boy, listen, so Tom, make up this story that your kids are gonna live somewhere, then you can family transfer it? That's ludicrous, and you wonder why your litmus test doesn't work so well. That is, you know, I don't think it is fair or right for you or anyone on the commission to say, you have to know what your kids are gonna do in 2 years? That's excuse me, that doesn't sound logical to me. So what are you saying my options are here? For me to do that, I gotta do a subdivision for you? Well, then I'm gonna parcel it up in 100 ways then. That's crazy. That is crazy. So do I have to get a sworn affidavit that my kids aren't gonna sell it in 2 years? They don't know they're gonna get it. That's kind of the surprise of a father, isn't it? You know what? Thank you for your time. I don't agree with anything you said.
Jenny?
One of the options that had crossed my mind, given all of the testimony and discussion today from the commissioners, is if there's a sense of wanting to create tracks for the children for recreation, you could view it as keeping the family close in residence to father who resides in Missoula and Patty Canyon and divide the property into 2 gifting tracts to the children. In the future, child could gift to Thomas as a father, should he in the future decide to actually build a house. And my hope is that you do. But I do, in this new information, I do feel that Dave has characterized it correctly. That
The
this is-
purpose of the tool.
Yeah, this is a little bit out of character, but trying to find a way to achieve something akin to what Mr. Thomas Miller is requesting.
Okay, so what would be the process to be able to thread that so that he could achieve that?
Well, this comes back to my original question, which was, had it been ever contemplated and could it be considered by the applicant to simply divide the parcel in half? What that would do is avoid the scenario that we're looking at here, which I can easily see being the case, that the 2 children get a parcel, a third parcel, the remainder is out there and it gets sold off to raise revenue at some point in time, and then the other parcels get sold off too. What Jenny's suggesting is if each of the children received 1 parcel, at some future date, if Mr. Miller wanted to reside up there, one of his kids could, I believe if I'm correct, gift
Transfer.
to him a portion of that for a residence.
Listen, you're saying
And in the interim, they retain the ability to use the entire
Property.
recreationally.
if I want to live up there, I'm asking my kids then to give me a piece of some acres so I could build a house.
No, then your child could transfer it to you. It would be cleaner.
Wait, so I divide it in half, give the halves to my 2 children, and then if I do decide I want to build where the T.
Oh, yeah, sorry, come up.
So if I understand it, you're saying I divide it in half. If in 2-3 years I decide, hey, I'm gonna finish my life up on the hill, then I ask my children to gift me a parcel back to me?
Yes.
And
That
what's the added expense of doing that? I don't want to have to keep paying for something I own, so there's some legal identification that fits some umbrella that you're falling under. What's the process of doing that?
It's this process, but in reverse, child gifting to parent. There's another option that, again, not knowing your situation or your wishes, where you wouldn't, there's the opportunity to build multiple dwellings on these tracts without even creating land divisions. So, gifting to your 2 children is really gifting them their own tract, which by the discussion here today doesn't even necessarily seem like that's their goal, is to have a tract. They certainly can come up and they could even build homes on this property, assuming you get sanitation approval, without having to have separate tracts. So that ability does exist right now for you, your daughter and your son to have homes on this property without creating these tracts. So I think the commissioners are trying to, and we're all trying to explain that in a way. It gets very complicated, but that you can do that. Creating these tracts sets up a scenario that the county is trying to avoid, has been trying to avoid through these family transfers, not trying to prevent you from enjoying your land up there. The options would be to come back and do a family transfer from whichever child and create a tract out of that parcel that you've gifted to that child, or you don't necessarily need to create a tract and you could just build a home, or you could just use it for recreation.
But that doesn't seem tidy for equitable division of what I own to my children. That now puts me 100% under them, which is not what any parent wants to be, under their children. But that you're saying is my option.
Right, or to maintain that control that you're talking about is let them build homes on the property should they so desire in the
They may
future.
not want to build homes, that's the whole point. Why can't I divide a property so, hey, kids, when I die, you have equal things? What's under T, per my will, gets divided equally amongst them,
Right.
right? Okay, but that's after I'm dead. So I can't gift to my 2 children while I'm living, say, hey, look what Dad done for you, because you're afraid they're gonna sell it right away? But if they want to build a home right away, they can build a home right away. I don't care if they ever build a home. I hope they don't build a home, right? I want a place to go. So I don't get it, so thank you for at least the suggestion, but whew, you're putting life beyond what typically a parent would expect with what they have, right? So when you have a house in Missoula and you have 3 kids, the only way they can benefit from it is when you die. Right? Hey, kids, you can't have my backyard. Don't play in the backyard without building a house. That, to me, makes no sense, right? But that's what they're saying. I can't have the privilege as a parent to give my kids something while I'm still alive unless they build on it. That's
Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Ken, I guess I would also bring up the option of a life estate. Have you explored that as a possibility or thought of that at all? That may be something we could talk about as well.
That sounds
And
like a
that's,
lawyer thing.
thanks to our clerk and recorder's office who just texted a suggestion, maybe another way to accomplish what Mr. Miller would like to.
Yeah, we can explore options after this decision.
Ken had said we can explore options after this decision. So would it make then sense to deny this decision so that you can have the freedom to go forward with a new plan, or are we pausing this?
I think that if, I wish I didn't think that the best way would be to deny this at this point and kind of start fresh, because the application just.
There's just more information now, so.
Information, and it might change. There is an additional $200 fee, but I can check with our office and see what we can do with that.
About waiving it, okay. Dave, sorry.
Yeah, so, one last question, and I get your frustration, Mr. Miller, because it does not appear as it's going the way in which you probably intended it would, but believe me, we've been through these processes before and are looking, as you speak, for a way to thread the needle here.
Thank you.
Jenny, is there, are there any, I'm assuming you've already investigated this, any stray boundary lines within this parcel that could be
Relocated?
I have explored that, and this is one full parcel.
Okay. All right, Juanita, I'm ready for a motion.
Okay.
Well, let me sit down so.
I would move that we deny the Thomas E. Miller family transfer.
Okay, second. Any further discussion? Just hope that you guys will get together and,
Absolutely.
okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, and you'll talk to Tyler? Or Tyler's talking to you?
Yeah, I will, and we'll talk with Ken if they want to pursue a life estate or a different type of family transfer.
There is a way we can get through this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other business? Okay, we're adjourned. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.